Okay, welcome to another episode of Eric's Perspective. Joining me today is artist, actor, singer, Suesan Stovall. Suesan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I should say that we're doing this by Zoom. I'm in my gallery in Fullerton, California, and Susan's in her studio in Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. So, Susan, I thought we'd start by just remembering exactly. I think you mentioned before during a phone conversation that you had actually been to my gallery in Santa Monica before. Is that right?
Mhm.
Do I remember that
Yes,
correct? And so that
yes.
was some years ago. I was just trying to recall that first encounter.
I
Do you
don't,
remember it?
I don't even think we met that night.
Oh,
I
okay.
went because I wanted to see your space. And
Ah,
I think we might have just passed and said hello, but I think I went twice. But the
okay.
second time I went, you weren't there.
And that was in Santa Monica, right?
Mhm. I
Okay.
love that space.
Oh gosh, I miss it.
That staircase. Woo!
Oh my goodness. It's so funny because a lot of people were thinking this is such a weird space, but I loved it because you walked up the steps and then you're in the first room and then you had the terrace situation going on. And anyway, each room gave the opportunity to single out particular artist or in the case of a solo exhibit, some aspect of their art that was,
It was lovely. It was a
yeah,
great space.
excellent. Thank you. So I thought maybe we also start by just talking a little bit about you. So where were you born?
New York City.
New York City, and you were raised there.
Yep.
Okay, and so as you look back on it, what do you, what is your earliest memory of getting involved in any form of the arts? Because you're involved in different branches of it, but I was just curious to know, can you trace back when you got interested in art?
My mom always recognized that I had some kind of artistic talent, and I was a little wild, so she needed to focus me as well. But she always put me in art. I went to this all different kinds of art camps and performing art camps and fine art camps, but I was more focused on performing arts at the time. But I still had this penchant towards fine arts as well. But that wasn't something I was more geared towards being an actor and a singer and stuff like that. But I did have a lot of exposure to artists as well. So I was exposed to a lot of artists when I was growing up, and I got to see a lot of their work and get to know who they were and get inspired by them. And I also had, my family was very cultural, so we always went to museums. We always went to openings of galleries and things like that. So I was always surrounded by the art world anyway.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you mentioned that too because I don't think a lot of folks realize how impactful it can be just being taken to museums and galleries and so forth, having that exposure. It may not show itself up immediately, but over time, it's. I've talked to I don't know how many different artists of all different stripes that say those early exposures kind of planted seeds.
I mean, even as an established artist, as established as I am, where in my way, even I went to the California African American Museum.
Hmm.
Saw her had a show, and I didn't know her at the time. I knew of her work, but I didn't know her. And I went and I saw this closet she did, or some I forget what the piece was, but I just buckled at my knees and I went to my knees on the floor. I was so
Oh,
blown away by it. So even as an adult, a seasoned artist or whatever, I've seen a lot of, I still am moved by the physical presence of being in the space of that work.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that is so important to be in the presence of it. I know one of the side benefits of having a gallery myself is just being exposed to all the different art and just spending time with it. Sometimes by myself when the gallery is closed, it's kind of feeds the soul, so to speak. I would say.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, what was the first branch of the arts that you focused on and started to develop? Do you recall?
In terms of fine arts,
In terms
or
of visual versus singing versus acting,
definitely performing, definitely acting.
acting, and
Mhm.
what attracted you to acting?
I'm a ham. Mhm.
And so, were you would anybody if you said, "Hey, I was in such and such," were you like in any early television shows or anything
I
like
was
that?
in the movie Fame. I did a lot of videos and stuff, but when I got out of high school, I went to performing arts high school, the performing arts high school. And
In Los Angeles?
no, in New York City.
New York City.
Fame, I want to live forever.
Ah, okay, okay.
Real school.
Really?
I'm not saying that school isn't real, but the original Fame, performing arts high school. And when I got out into the real world, now we were part of our training was they prepared us for not working a lot.
Ah.
They prepared us for getting rejected 98% of the time we went to look for a job. Yeah. That's one reason I fell into art, because I just started making art to make money. I wasn't thinking about having an art career. Mm-hmm. I used to make magnets and stuff. I figured out how to make stuff for occasions like Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, Father's Day, Christmas, all that stuff. But I wasn't thinking about being an artist. I was just thinking about making money, paying the rent so I could go audition.
Ah, I see.
And because of why I mentioned the rejection part is because it was difficult for me to get a job as an actor because it's very typecast. I looked like, I had a certain few categories that I fit into at the time. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't get that many jobs. So that pushed me into singing more because I didn't have to fit a type. All I had to do was open my mouth and be able to sing.
Oh, okay.
That's when so that was after high school, and after college, I started, focusing more on singing, but I was still performing. I just love performing in front of people, but the artwork started as a way to make money.
Oh, I see. And would you say, like you mentioned, is that while you were in high school kind of a thing when you started doing it, or later when you were in college and afterwards?
Well, I always made presents for people. I always made cards and, gifts and stuff. I always was into collage, just as a hobby. I used to make dollhouses and stuff when I was young. So I was always doing it.
Ah, I see.
So I think that's how I got into maybe I could sell some of this for Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe every Christmas. And then I started developing a little following with people that I would call, because then I moved to California. But I had clients in New York because I used to sell on the street in New York. I would sell anywhere. I sold on the subway. And I started out with these little plastic boxes, these little hinged plastic boxes that I turned into magnets. Uh-huh. They're like little dioramas. And I sold them for $5 out of this wooden box. I'd take them out anywhere and show them to anybody. So I'd go home with at least $30.
That must have been an interesting experience. I mean, like on subway stations and stuff like that, you were
anywhere.
I
mean, one time I was on Cooper Union on, right by Astor Place, and I had my stuff out on a blanket in the summer. And this dude comes by and he goes, "Hey, how much are you selling those things for?" I said, $5. He said, "I wouldn't give you 5 cents. At which point I decided it was time to go home. I already had $25 in my pocket. I was like, that's it, I'm done.
Well, when you say you were done for the day or just done totally?
Done for the day, just today. Finish wrapping up, gonna put my blanket away and go home. I went out again, but anyway, so I developed a following of people who would expect my phone calls around the holidays. And those people then started supporting me when I started selling as a, gallery showing artist. They just followed me, but they still supported my little stuff, which I needed in the meantime.
Oh, sure. And I'm guessing that the training you got to prepare for rejection and stuff like that probably might have helped you otherwise, right? In terms of,
definitely.
In terms of the even the visual arts, I know that dealing with artists over the years, one of the, that whole fear of people looking at it and then not liking it and that kind of thing. It's a risk that artists take.
See, I never worried about that because fortunately for me, I always felt so grateful that I didn't go in the art world through the art world. I just sort of ended up there because somebody recognized that I could show. But I wasn't intending on showing in any galleries ever. It was not even on my radar.
I see. And mainly because you were still pursuing the performing arts, right?
Which I still am.
And you still are?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And so what drew you to Los Angeles?
That's a long story. My career basically, and it was time to make a shift out of New York. And I just felt it. I felt a pull to go to LA, and it was the best choice I could have made.
And how long were you in LA?
About 30 years, a little over 30 years.
Oh, so quite a while.
And I'm planning on going back. I had a little bit of a setback there, but I'm working my way back home.
Oh, okay. So you consider LA home?
Mhm.
Okay, excellent.
I haven't been back there since the pandemic, so I don't know what it looks like anymore. But my friends on the street keep me informed.
Well, that the pandemic, of course, changed everything for everybody. It seems like, but LA. I just went to Art Freeze, by the way. That was kind of interesting
Oh wow!
in Beverly Hills. That was
Mhm.
kind of cool. But yeah, so the art scene is still pretty active with
Well,
LACMA.
downtown, I heard the downtown LA art scene is really popping
Yeah,
still.
yeah. It's really
And that's exciting for me. That's what I want to get. I'm so impressed by the LA art scene. Actually, I wasn't always like selling art was easier for me on the East Coast than it was on the West Coast.
And why do you think that is?
I don't know. Cheap people are cheap. I don't know.
Well, one thing I thought about was that, I mean, New York has a longer history in the visual arts anyway. I mean, with the existence of those museums that go way back. I don't know. It just seems like it's more of a, I mean, things are changing in LA, of course, now, but
Maybe people didn't understand it. I mean, just from a tacky perspective, which isn't tacky, I just say that, but gauche. But maybe people didn't realize that art was could be part of their portfolios. And now they're starting to realize that, and now they're starting to invest in art and artists more than I've ever seen it in LA. And Black artists that I know of are getting more attention than before.
yeah, no, that's true. I think it's across the board too. I mean, it's been just an incredible arc. Uh, Things probably aren't where they should be in terms of the full recognition, but it's getting close. Though I think it's picked up quite a bit. Has been my
Mhm.
observation. But it's so funny because when you were talking about selling your art in New York City, it reminded me of David Hammonds, who was out here in L.A. He goes back to New York, and he was selling snowballs there for a while.
I have his doll shoes upstairs.
You're kidding?
I have a pair of his doll shoes.
No kidding.
He sold snowballs on the table. He's on the table,
Yeah.
and I didn't buy one. I just threw one at him. But and
Did it hit
was
him?
he was in that California African American show too.
Yeah.
And it was his work that was in the closet. That's why I stopped talking, because I remembered it wasn't Betty's that was the piece which hers did put me to my knees.
Yeah.
But seeing his piece, he had this piece of like a stand-up walk-in closet,
Yeah.
old school.
Right.
It like could have been in your grandmother's house.
Yeah.
And in it was like a frying pan and a broom and something else, but it was cool. $1 million. I'm like, he went from selling snowballs to $1 million in California. I'm in the right place right now.
Yeah, absolutely. His work has taken off. I mean,
But I really do have the doll shoes upstairs. There's one.
I believe you.
I saved them after that's 40 years ago.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, that's definitely something worth keeping on multiple levels. So when you first got out to LA, what was your experience like when you first arrived?
Rock and roll, baby. The first few months I was there, I was working with a band called Fishbone.
Uh-huh.
I fell into a recording session with them and ended up, they had to still have a major family. It's like you work with Fishbone, you get to work with all different kinds of other bands because it's like a nucleus.
Oh, wow.
And so from working with them, I got to work with a whole bunch of other people. And then I started doing session work, and because I was also pursuing my acting career.
Uh-huh.
So in trying to get an agent and working with managers and I did a lot of session work. I did, movies, soundtracks, commercials. I did a major close-up television commercial right before I moved out to LA, which is what gave me a year to live out there without having to worry about working.
So do you play an instrument as well, or is it just vocals?
No. I'm not good with math, so music theory.
Oh yeah.
But I can carry a tune.
Hey, well, that's the thing. If you have a good ear, yeah, I mean, there's so many musicians that are excellent musicians that don't even read music.
Muddy Waters couldn't spell his name. No, Otis Redding couldn't write. He would walk into a studio and tell people what he wanted them to sound like.
Uh-huh.
They would just play what he sang to them.
Yeah.
So that's what I do.
Okay. Yeah,
I write my own stuff too.
You write your own stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Are you still currently doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Very good. So Moving on to the visual arts, then. So roughly, when I know you said that you were making stuff from early on as gifts, and then later on to sell. Uh, did that continue? How did you make the transition, or did you make the transition to going from that to maybe showing in galleries or trying to show in
Well,
galleries or
it
anything
was
like that?
easy. It was pretty easy. I happened to be working for a gallery in LA at the time, again, without any preconceived notion of being a gallery showing artist. But uh, it was a gallery called Gallery of the Kai, and it was basically a Haitian oriented art gallery.
Mm-hmm.
They focused a lot on Haitian artists.
I remember that gallery, by the way.
Mhm. And so I would just study the composition of the art of their work. And I was doing, it was altar work, a lot of altar work, because Haitians do a lot of altar stuff and the voodoo tradition and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I just used to go and study it. And it simultaneously, again, to make money, I used to have a restaurant in my house called Sue's Kitchen every Sunday.
Oh.
And it was a vegetarian soul food restaurant. People would pay a minimal amount of money for a big heap of food, and social, it was a nice social gathering. People would, gather, and it was like a salon kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so in the midst of all that, I had this boyfriend that broke up with me for the third time. And I said, you know what? I am sick of this. I am not going to be miserable. I'm just going to sit down. I'm going to make stuff. And I just started working on these big pieces just for myself, just these big pieces of art, just stuff. I was just doing, they had themes and whatever, but they were for me.
Okay.
And a girlfriend of mine came over. She said, Susan, and her husband is an artist. She goes, you need to think about showing. I was like, what? And she said, you really need to think about showing in a gallery. And I was like, So at the time, I happened to be working for the gallery. So I had one of my dinners. I invited them over and to see the work and to eat. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the night, they offered me my first show.
Oh, excellent. So your first show was at the Gallery La Caille.
And it sold out that night. And I quit my job the next day and continued being an artist until now.
Oh, congratulations.
While pursuing everything else too. And then that took on a life of its own after that.
Now, when you say that, what do you mean?
Well, I started then realizing I could show in galleries. So that summer, I came to the Vineyard, which I come to every summer anyway. We have a family house here. Mm-hmm. And I went and introduced myself to a gallery owner, and she gave me a show.
Oh, fantastic. So that was, is it fair to say your second show was in Martha's Vineyard, or would that be farther down the line?
I was in a few group shows in between.
Okay.
So, yeah, but not that much farther down the line, actually.
Oh, okay. And so the work that you were showing that Gallery La Caille saw and exhibited, what was that like? What is would you say your sort of preferred, or was your preferred medium at that time anyway?
Well, at the time, I was very interested in altar work and in ancestral worship, in how it translated from Africa to the Americas, to Haiti, to Cuba, to, to Jamaica, and like how Africa was brought over with slavery and how it transmuted itself into what it is now. But I was just very drawn to the aesthetics of it. Of voodoo culture, of Santeria, of just regular Ifa, regular African, not regular, but African of itself, African altars and ancestor worship. That's really what got me.
Oh, that's interesting because he's passed away now, William Pajot. I know that he was, for the longest time, and many of his pieces was kind of inspired by that too. He's from New Orleans originally, and a lot of the voodoo culture ended up down there. Marie, I'm going to blank out on her name now. I'm forgetting her name, but she was a famous voodoo. Laveau, that's it, Laveau. And I know he did a lot of pieces dedicated to her. And
I have one. I've done a few.
Focusing on her as well. What a remarkable.
Scorpio too, like me.
Yeah, from what I understand, if I remember, she knew where the bodies were buried and all that kind of thing. She was pretty versatile and very interesting.
Yep, I've read a lot about her.
Yeah.
I'd love to play her one day.
Oh, I can see why. Yeah.
Great character.
But it's also interesting that you were focusing on the sort of the religious parts, because Slavery, I think, anyway, when you really think about it, is probably one of the worst crimes against humanity in the history of the world, kidnapping people and then bringing them not just to the United States, but elsewhere, South America, Caribbean, or elsewhere. But basically stripping those folks of their cultural practices, including the things you were mentioning.
Well, what I found interesting about Santeria especially was the way that they syncretized the saints, their own Yoruba deities, with Catholic saints. So they hid their religion in the Catholic religion. But it was interesting because, like, the English didn't have saints. The English worshiped differently, so their slaves had to go through different things to worship.
Uh-huh.
I think the first thing they did was take away the drum. But like the French and the Spanish, that's where Santeria happened, because they had Catholic saints they could hide their own gods in.
Interesting. Yeah.
And so that was interesting. But then, so the evolution after doing the altar work was, and I got into just doing African American history, like where that ancestral spirit lives in us as we have gone through all that, and continue to this day to deal with the remnants of that.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of work with photographs of slaves, cotton fields, and I've gone pretty deep into, like, I'm what they call mixed race, half caste. Mulatto is a word that is not used in my vocabulary.
And why do you object to the term mulatto, by the way?
Because it's a half mule. It's like a mule is a cross between a horse and an ass. Like, do I really want to be associated with being a mix like that? Like,
right.
I'm not a mule.
Right.
And it's a very derogatory word. So in a lot of my pieces, I used to do "I'm not a mule" in some form or another.
Interesting.
And then, so I did a lot of, like, I collected a lot of photographs, lynching photographs. Not so much though. I mean, I didn't focus so much on that, but I focused on just the faces, the history, the background of where these people lived and how they lived, and just the women. Like, it's like you can see the beauty of these women even in slave cotton clothing. You can see the regal. And so that's what I tried to bring out, is the regal, is the gloriousness of who we really are.
Yes.
In the midst of all this turmoil too. And then there's other stuff I do that's just beautiful ancestral. You can't see her right now, but like right here, this is one of the things.
Excellent. I'm trying to read. Does it say something?
We stand on the shoulders of giants.
Of giants. Okay. I saw the word giants and I was, okay, excellent.
So,
I like that idea though, because, it pays homage to our ancestors, and that washing board reminds me my grandmother had one of those.
Right. Now you see this is a slave couple.
Oh, okay.
An actual photograph of a slave couple.
During slavery, or this is after?
Yeah, during slavery.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so I pay homage to our ancestors.
Yeah. One time I was at a gathering, and it was to honor August Wilson, and he made this point that in the Jewish faith and culture, they acknowledge slavery as part of their rituals, and he wanted African Americans to adopt something very similar, not try to gloss over or be ashamed of it, but just to talk about it and acknowledge it, and understand and appreciate what folks who were enslaved had to go through. It's
I wonder what August Wilson would think about cancel culture.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm about to do a whole body of work on that right now. Maybe just a few pieces, but it'll be a body. I'm so sick of this cancel culture business. It's like, how can you cancel culture? See, that's another reason why I do the kind of work I do. And I show the images that I show, because about some years ago, I worked for a model dressing company, and one of the dressers had a daughter in Guyana. And the reason she was bringing her daughter to America was because she didn't like the way her daughter was being educated. Reason being, they told her child, who was maybe 12, Oh, don't worry about Africa. You didn't come from there. That doesn't exist. You come from here.
Oh, wow.
Your past, it doesn't matter.
Just
You're here with us now. It's over. It
just
doesn't
cut off,
exist.
trying to cut her off from her family.
Gaslit it, the whole thing doesn't exist.
Oh, wow.
And that happens still, and they're trying to do that now.
Huh.
Like yesterday, I saw this commercial for this foundation for women.
Mm-hmm.
This miraculous new foundation. They got light and medium, no dark.
Oh, wow.
I was where's the dark skin? Nothing. And it was like only light and only medium. That's it.
Wow.
Who do you just cancel?
Yeah. Right. That's kind of sad.
That's the kind of stuff that gets my blood boiling and me working.
Yeah. So that kind of thing informs your work to this day, would
Definitely.
You say? Yeah.
I mean, growing up as a mixed race person, you get both perspectives.
Yeah.
And not all of it's nice either. Both perspectives, there's one side that's equally as ignorant as the other in certain aspects.
Sure.
And we're all human, but that race thing, man.
So when you were growing up, did you, as a child and maybe as an adolescent, are there any things that stand out in your memory that were, I don't know, particularly good or bad?
How much time do we have?
Well, maybe one or two things that stand out the most. First thing comes to your mind, maybe.
People wanted to fight me all the time, boys and girls. And it was mostly, I don't want to get into a whole thing about black girls, but the dark-skinned black girls like to beat the crap out of me all the time. Yeah. And all I wanted to do was play, but this is a very touchy subject.
Oh, no, of course it is. I am a fair skin.
Not for me so much, but for other people, because I'm very comfortable with who I am.
Yeah.
But it was but 9 times out of it was either the dark-skinned black girls that beat me up, or it was the white girls that just ignored me. They defended me for a little bit, but then, she's the public school girl. Oh, she's this or she's that. I'm going to do a whole piece about all the things people have said about me in my life. She thinks she's too good. She got that good hair. Let me take a chunk out of your head for you.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Oh, how good is that?
Wow.
So it was rough, but I'm not complaining about it. I am who I am today. I can hang out in Skid Row by myself.
Yeah. Well, I haven't heard that term in a long time, by the way, the good hair thing, but I have heard that. Obviously, that's a part of the history.
Well, I'll tell you something that happened here recently, which I find very interesting. This whole color dynamic, and it goes from it goes the whole perspective.
Sure, the whole gamut. Yeah.
I was out in Oak Bluffs. This was like, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And I was out with some friends of mine, a mixed group of people. And I noticed I wasn't eating. So I was standing outside of this burger joint. Mm-hmm. And I saw these really fly sisters that looked like they came from Roxbury or whatever. Okay. I didn't really notice where they came from. I just noticed what they had on.
Right.
Hot pink shorts, just done like, glamour, but hot pink. And they had on patent leather high heel shoes. Their hair was all did, nails, everything. And I just in Oak Bluffs in Martha's Vineyard in the summer, I was like, these girls are fly. So I took a photograph of them. Okay. And you couldn't see their faces, so it wasn't like personal. So I posted it on a site that our people look at.
Sure.
I got so much grief from young girls who probably have horsehair and green contact lenses. We don't do that on the vineyard. That's ghetto. We don't do that. Who?
Really?
Oh yeah. And I got into a back and forth with this one girl. I mean, this is not that long ago. Wow. I was like, yeah, you want to say that to me? Meet me at the Inkwell. Let's have this discussion in person. Didn't hear from her again, obviously. But then the girl who put the website up took it down because I did swear and I did call her and I apologized for swearing at this girl. But it was about my photographs. So the girl said, listen, her and them, we're going to put the website back up. We're going to put your comments back up with the photograph. But we're going to, she said, we're going to put the photograph back up. But we're going to disable the comments.
I see.
But it was so weird that our people hate each other equally. As white people do too. So it's not white, black. It's just something.
Sometimes black on black.
Not like each other.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say that it starts from slavery, or they taught us to hate ourselves, whatever. I was like, okay, I get that part, but I don't get how come we're not taking better care of women too.
Yeah.
You know, as women. So I try to address all this in my work. I always have at least get your hair did, you know, with African women in a beauty salon in Zanzibar 150 years ago, getting their hair did. I have those photographs. So, you know, anything else you want to know?
No, that's fascinating, you know, and it's topical, obviously. What it sounded like to me when you described it is these folks were embarrassed by those photographs, that the way you were saying it.
And these girls, I mean, they were gorgeous.
Yeah.
They were, I mean, and the administrator of the website thought they were too. That's why she had me put them back up. But we had a serious conversation about the attitude of these other ones.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we don't what?
Wow.
And honestly, you know, one of the things that I like about being an artist, I don't have to talk. You know, being an entertainer, being a performer, you're always on. And I like that. I mean, I've grown up my whole life doing it, but there's a part of being an artist that's completely silent. And I really like that. So it gives me a lot of time to think about what I want to say and who I want to say it to.
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that, because I've had some artists that I would always give this as an option to any artist showing in my gallery to do a tour and talk about the work. And occasionally I'd get the response from the artist, hey, listen, I'm not really verbal. I speak through the art itself. And so I just rely on I listen to what people say that they see in it, and they take all that in, but they're not really comfortable talking about it.
I wasn't either for a long time, but what changed my dealing with that, I was in Australia one time and I went to see this exhibit of this photographer who had taken photographs of all these Maoris and their face tattoos and then painted them. And so listening to the docent describe what each tattoo meant on each line and each face, on each face, made me understand that if I hadn't heard the description, I never would have understood how deep that was, because there might be 30 lines on one face and each one means something different. And if I hadn't heard her describe that, I wouldn't have known that. And that was very key to what the stories were told on these people's faces.
Sure. It helps you to understand what you were looking at, in other words.
Yep. So even when I don't have a story now, I'm a writer, so I just make it up. And they're happy. They, you know, they like the piece. So.
Well, you know, I've had that as experience as an art dealer too, by the way. I mean, where, you know, before somebody sees something, they're kind of attracted to it, but when they hear the story, that's the thing that carries them over the top, you know, and they're even more interested.
Yeah, or not.
Or not. But usually the or not part comes right up at the beginning. I remember Elizabeth Catlett did a series of lino cuts called I'm the Black, well, start out as I Am the Negro Woman in the 40s. And there was one scene in particular she depicted of a man having been lynched. And so it was a difficult topic. And the reason for there was an admiration about the subject matter, but an acknowledgement that they didn't want to necessarily have that in their collection, where they wake up in the morning and see something as horrific as that, right? So sometimes, you know, it's like that, an acknowledgement of the truth of it and admiring it, but not really wanting to own it.
It's funny that you say that. Some friends of ours, one of them has recently passed, bless him. His wife is a major collector of mine and bought this piece that I was shocked. It was heavy duty, dark slavery. You know, it was dark. And she bought it. I was shocked because as an artist, you can tell there's some people who come around, they're like, so that was just bought. That was the one I was going to buy. And they say that at every show. So you can always peg that one. Oh, my friend just bought that one. Oh, that was the one I wanted.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was one like that sort of. So the piece that she ended up was massive. But I was like, really? I mean, they're not. Anyway, some years later, she decided to donate it to Harvard because I said, in my head, I was like, her husband did not like waking up and passing that thing every day in his summer house.
Right.
No.
Right.
I understood that. You know what I mean?
By the way, I tell you a little, when you were describing that scene where people come by and they see that it's been sold and they say, darn, I wish I could have gotten that. Oh, a funny incident happened one time. I had a work up by an artist and it was actually a serigraph. So there were multiples of them. It was hung and it had been sold. I put a red dot on it and the person walked up and said, darn, I wish I could have had. But then I told the person, hey, guess what? I've got a one exactly like it. All of a sudden, he started backpedaling. It was kind of hilarious. Sometimes it can backfire. Anyhow, so you mentioned before your work is informed by these various things we've been talking about. Is there, in your body of work, are there other things that inspire you to work? Are there other themes that you explore?
I work with angels a lot, hence what's behind me. I do a lot of angel work.
Okay.
I like having angelic energy around me.
Okay.
I do a lot of crystal work. So I try to make my work have energy in it. So when you take it home to your house, you can feel what I've just done. This is actually one of my favorite stories. In 2001, in June, we had a what do you call it? When you go back to reunion.
There we go.
We had a high school reunion. And whenever I travel, I do something called gallery in a bag. And I put enough artwork in my knapsack to sell, to pay for the trip.
Okay.
So I let people know in advance when I'm coming and I make appointments. So for this particular trip, a friend of mine in Brooklyn had a bookstore. So she said I could come and bring my stuff and set up in the bookstore, which I did. So, and I was leaving for LA to go back to LA that night. So I was just there really quickly that afternoon. So there's this woman who was sitting at another table and she kept looking over and I could see her. And I said, you can look, it's okay. Mm-hmm. And so she saw these two pieces that she really wanted. And she goes, but I don't get paid till Friday. And I said, well, I'm going back to LA today. So here's my card, give me your card, take the pieces, send me the check. Bye. And I left.
Wow, that's a lot of trust. A lot of trust. Yeah.
Well, she seemed really cool.
Okay.
Well, few days later, doorbell rings. It's FedEx. It was one of the most beautiful cards of Frida Kahlo. The card was a painting of Frida Kahlo. And inside was the most beautiful. The check was in there for the pieces.
Oh, wow.
And the most beautiful note that I cried for about an hour. Wow. How grateful she was at the exchange, and the whole thing just made her really happy. Okay, so that's fast beautiful. Forward to September 2001. 10 days after 9/11, I get FedEx again, rings the doorbell. No, was it? Yeah, FedEx rang the doorbell. And it was another package from her, the same woman. And she said, because of our exchange in June, she wanted to commission me to do a piece for her firehouse that had lost 11 of their men. Oh, wow. And the neighborhood in Brooklyn had been giving them clothes and food and stuff like that, but she wanted to give them something significant. And so she commissioned me to do this piece, and I didn't charge her anything for it. I just had her pay for the shipping. And she said, by the time that piece got there, because I had people come over and pray on it and put their, logo on it. She said, by the time it got there to her in Brooklyn, she said she could hardly keep the box closed. It was so full of energy. And when I finally met the firemen, it turns out that at my reunion, one of the women there was one of the widows of the guy, one of the firemen in Squad 1.
Oh my God.
And we didn't even know. So she came and joined us for lunch because they made me lunch when I was there.
Wow, that is a beautiful story. I love that.
They made me linguine and clam sauce and told me dirty jokes for 2 hours. And then at the end, the guy who was like showing me around took me up to their bunk room where they put the piece. The piece was a big piece. And the quote was, greater love hath no man than this, and the man should lay down his life for his friends. Yeah. And it's, it was in I won't describe the piece, but he looked at me and goes, now that I got you here, can I ask you what does this piece mean? Little Irish dude, he's like, what is it? And I told him, he was like, oh, it was right above his bed.
Oh, wow. So when you told him, did it resonate with him? Could he see what you were saying?
Yes.
Oh, it must have been a wonderful moment.
He almost started to cry.
Oh, wow. That must have been a wonderful moment for both of you. Well, what I love that though. The trust you placed in her and the appreciation that she had and the love that you guys exchanged. That's a beautiful thing.
And it got to bring a lot of people because a lot of my friends in LA were from New York.
Uh-huh. Oh
We
yeah.
were we were all like, it just felt like just we didn't know what to do. So
Yeah.
I had one of my dinners, and and it was dedicated to this particular piece, and everybody got to write a note. And there was another firehouse that was also included, but not for me to make a piece, but I made a big card for them.
Uh-huh.
They got something too. So
You know, that takes me back because my oldest daughter was accepted at NYU, and that was her first. I had just moved her in 3 weeks before 9/11 occurred to her dorm room, and that dorm area was in the forbidden zone after the attack took place. It was a harrowing time for me as I couldn't communicate with her. It was pretty incredible. But anyway, the
she
good
never
news.
thought she'd be seeing tanks at school.
Oh no, absolutely. The good news is though, she and all of her classmates and roommates that were in that dorm area were evacuated and safe, and it all worked out okay. But anyway, what a time.
Oy.
Yeah. So you have your own gallery, and how long ago did you start that?
Maybe 15 years ago.
Oh, okay. And can you remind me the name? I want to say
Groovy Sue Gallery.
Groovy Sue Gallery. Okay.
And the reason it's called that is because about 15, 16 years ago, I was working with a graffiti artist named Tim. His name is Tap. And one day I went to work with him and he said, "Yo, what's up, Groovy?" And he's Cape Verdean. Every Cape Verdean has a nickname.
Okay.
So, Groovy Sue stuck right then and there. So that's how the Groovy Sue name got started, and the brand got started, and the gallery got started.
Excellent. And is the gallery in the same location it was when you first started it?
Yes.
And that's in Martha's Vineyard, right? Oak Bluff. Okay.
Yep. Now I've shown in other galleries here, but I just decided that I knew more people than these people knew.
Yeah.
And was like, and if that a business, then you put on your business hat. Like for me, it was a financial decision.
Yeah.
Like I don't, if I was getting more clients from these people than I already had,
and
I would have stayed in the gallery, other people selling my work. But I knew most of the people. I'm like, why am I giving you half of my money when I already know these people?
Yeah, sure. I understand. And is it only your work that you show there, or do you show other people?
I get too nervous with other people's work. It's like having somebody's baby. I did that once. I've given 2 people shows, and I was like more nervous for them than I was for myself.
It's funny you say that too. By the way, I've heard many artists refer to their work as their baby, kind of like a child. You go through sort of labor, so to speak, and then out comes this piece.
The first show I had at Gallery with a Kai, my roommate had to pry me out of. I was going to cancel the show. I was so attached to my pieces. I'd never done this before, and I loved them because I made them for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't really make them for anybody else. So the night of the show, we were just going to go and say, we're going to stand outside and say, "Sorry, show's canceled." But then when it sold out, I was like, "What else do you want? I got some more in the house."
Yeah, I understand. So, by the way, so what are you working on now as we speak in terms of the visual arts? That is,
I've got about 50 or 60 different pieces I'm working on right now, little and big.
Oh, okay.
I'm working on some writing. I have a big photographic project. I think I mentioned to you about my homeless project.
Oh yes. Tell us about that, by the way, the homeless project.
Well, I'm friends with a lot of people in LA who are homeless. And I've been friends with homeless people my whole life. I just never really saw, I know the difference between somebody who lives indoors and not, but I've always had friends who live in the street. And I have some about, 15, 20 years ago, I just started taking photographs of LA. I love urban decay. That's one of the things that informs my style and my aesthetic is I love decay. I just love it. And the way it decays and the way it plays out at the end of the decay. So I started taking photographs of urban decay, buildings, buildings that were getting demolished, what they looked like before, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, people started showing up in these frames.
Wow. And they were occupying these decaying buildings?
or outside of them, or sleeping on mattresses outside of them, or but they just started showing up more outside of these buildings that I was walking by.
Mm-hmm.
So I started taking photographs of these people and then getting to know them. And then there was a whole community in my neighborhood that I knew. But they all, and everybody knew what I was doing. You know, so they told me a lot of their stories. So I've documented a lot of their stories. I have about 4,000 photographs. And that's really what I want my next show to be on, because I raise money for them as well. There's one organization in LA called LA on Cloud 9,
Mm-hmm.
and I adore them because they take care of homeless people and their pets.
Ah, okay.
And they've been I've watched their work. I've seen what they do for years, and I just have a lot of respect for them. So part of what I do is raise money for them.
Very nice. Um, and so when you took these photographs, sounds like it started out just your attraction to these buildings that are abandoned and in decay and so forth. But then all of a sudden you saw these folks, around them or in them, however. Um, what are some of the things that you took from that? I mean, talking to these people, what was it is there anything that stands out that you learned from them?
Yep, that they want to be recognized as human beings.
Yeah.
That a lot of people just walk by them and don't acknowledge their humanity.
Yeah.
And with some of my homeless friends, I was trying to decide like what I should say, what my focus was, and on focusing on their humanness or making. And I was like, that sounds really, kind of patronizing. And they're like, no, you are, and that's what we want. Is for these people to understand we're human beings just like everybody else. How come we just can't? Why do we have to be bums? Why can't we just be people having a hard time?
And is that what you found out? Because I have to tell you, I mean, when I was in Santa Monica, there was a fairly large homeless population there as well.
And worse now.
Yeah, and there were a lot of complaints about them. And my own experience was that it's hard to, impossible really, to stereotype them in any way. Just like in the population at large, there was a variety of people with a variety of stories of how they got to where they were. I was just wondering if that was something else that you picked up in your experience with them.
I mean, it's varied. Like one guy, the first person I ever met was an artist. His name was Pops, and he was a Vietnam veteran. Mm. And I met him one day coming out of a 99-cent store, and he saw I had canvases in my car. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "Oh, so you're an artist?" And I said, "Yep." And he goes, "Me too." That's why he had a camper. And he lived facing the Hollywood Hills because he liked to paint the hills. Oh. And I said, "Well, when's the last time you painted anything?" He goes, "Well, I haven't had any paint in a while, and I haven't had a canvas in a while." And I said, "All right, hold on, I'll be back." I went home and got him some canvas, got him some paint, and a couple paintbrushes, and took him right back. And that began a very serious friendship.
Excellent.
And so what I learned about him was the reason he was in the streets, because he was a stressed out Vietnam vet. And really had no patience for bureaucracy or anybody telling him what to do, and had been in the streets for a very long time. And we went to something that I'll tell you about it another time, but I helped save his life once too. But basically he was in the street was because he wanted to be outside.
I see.
He didn't want to be confined.
I was going to say, did he feel claustrophobic inside of spaces? Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say?
And the thing is, like, but then I know a schizophrenic woman who was just sexually molested when she was a kid, knocked around a bunch of times. Oh, wow. And that's why she was outside. She didn't want to be inside either, but she didn't trust anybody. And she didn't trust me for a long time, until one time we had it out in the street and it was all right. We didn't fight or anything, but she's like, "What are you hanging out with bums for?" I'm like, "I don't see you as a bum." So, and then we moved on from there. But so her problem was mental health.
Yeah, that's the thing I noticed in Santa Monica. A lot of folks were in that category.
Mm-hmm. And like I had a friend who I helped pass away, and I got to social worker and worker, and they were amazing people, but their caseloads are huge. Astronomical.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of money to be made in social work either. No. And you got to deal with, all the stress that it takes doing that job. Mm-hmm. So you got people who want to do it, but they can't.
No, right. I remember years ago, there used to be services more available many years ago, and then that budget got cut. And that just made it even more difficult for folks that
And
found
then the poor
themselves.
police now have to be the social workers, and that isn't working,
No.
you know? So anyway, that's part of what comes out with these photographs is the stories of some of these people who have given me the permission to talk with them and tell their stories.
Yeah.
Then I want to become them as an actor. I want to become them in front of, like, my ultimate thing is to have a show of 10 or 15 of these photographs and become each one of the people in the photographs on stage.
I see. Have you already selected or thought about which photographs?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well, we'll have to keep our eye out for that.
I will definitely keep you posted on that one.
Please do, please do. Anything else, by the way, you're working on besides
that piece that you have right behind you? The colors look so much like this piece I'm working on right now.
This one here?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, let me just tell you, that's John Riddle, and he calls that Before Columbus. And it's really funny about John. John was such an interesting person. He passed away in 2002, and he was the curator at California African American Museum at the time, and he and I were planning a solo exhibit of his. He was actually working on pieces at the time of his death that would have been in the show, and sadly he passed away before we could actually complete the works and before we had a chance to put on the show. But I remember him saying all the time that the middle passage was obviously horrible for all the reasons we have talked about and read about. But the other thing was, he said, imagine all of the talent that was at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, people that could have been scientists or artists or philosophers or you name it. And so the tragedy of losing so many gifted folks, I mean, the loss of life is always bad, but on top of that, the loss of their potential and their talents and so forth. So one of the things he also focused on was, and that's what this piece is kind of about, is that Africans explored the continent before Columbus. Mm-hmm. And he points to the colossal heads in South America and other things that sort of provide evidence of the African explorations, and refuting the idea that black people have no history. Sort of what you were talking about before, with a person trying to deny that person's cancel culture thing. So cancel culture is nothing new to African Americans or African Brazilians or whatever. It's been basically trying to cancel that whole thing. But John, that's John's one of his answers to that whole idea. So yeah. And then on the other side, incidentally, that's Michael Massenburg. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but that piece he calls
assemblage, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it's he calls it Middle Passage, and so it deals with the horrific thing of slavery. You can't see it from this particular angle, but on the side of it,
the vibe.
Yeah, on the side of it, there's that whole, how slaves were arranged in the hold of those ships, spoon style and so forth, where it's pretty just crammed in there in inhumane conditions and so forth. So, yeah, that's what
There's one thing I want to show you real quick. It's right here.
Yeah, sure.
So, just because it's an assemblage, and it's right here.
Okay.
Speaking of images of what we do in the meet, can you see that?
Yeah.
Now that's 100. This is a stage photograph, obviously, but it's 100-something-year-old photograph of before church.
Oh, okay. People getting ready to go to church.
Getting ready for church, and this is a stereo. What are those rolls? Piano roll.
Oh yeah.
Top piano roll box. Elijah. So I try,
Oh yeah.
I try to make that the preacher's shoe form.
I was going to say I noticed the shoe form at the top. That's awesome.
So,
Is that something you recently did, or is that one of your earlier works?
Last year, and then I've got like this one. I love this one.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Fine cut.
I like that.
Again, I found these shoe forms. I love them. I didn't know what to do with them. So.
That's very clever, though. You're using it as a way to stand up the.
But again, it came to me. I didn't choose that. It just showed up. Like a lot of things. Okay, this is one thing I neglected to mention, which I think I need to.
Okay.
I dream a lot. And my dreams tend to inform me about things. I have visions about things. I hear things. I see things. And so a lot of what I do comes from the visions that I have. And so you said, like, what informs your work? What, it depends on the day, really.
Yeah,
what
sure.
comes from vision. Now, if I'm working on a particular series, then I'm focused on that. But still, with that, things show up like just magical little gifts from the universe all the time to finish pieces. That one little thing will show up at the end.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
A lot of magic that happens in my work as well.
Oh, I love that. And the fact that you're in touch with your dreams, I think all of us could benefit from paying closer attention to what just comes out in our dreams.
Well, my biggest lesson in the last year was to learn how to listen better. And listening means listening to myself, listening to other people, but also listening to just listening to see what you hear.
Yeah.
And that could be anything. It could be a song. It could be, it could be something special. Just listening, seeing what the universe brings to you when you listen.
I love that. I think that's a good thing, a very good thing. Yeah. So, what else is going on currently with you in terms of not just the visual arts, but anything else in terms of singing, or are you slated to perform anywhere? Should we be aware of?
Oh, I'm on the vineyard right now, and there's not a whole lot going on here for me.
Oh, okay.
Just it's not season. I'm not used to being here in the winter. I got a lot waiting for me back in LA. So as soon as I can, I'm going to get back to LA and see if I can move back there or not. That's the biggest thing, is trying to figure out a place to live.
I see. Well, what a contrast, right? I mean, it's LA.
Don't get me wrong. I'm grateful for being here.
Oh, no, I'm not getting. No, I understand. I was born in the East Coast myself, but I have become a West Coast person. I just love the Mediterranean.
I'll tell you, the only thing I like about the winter is the clothing.
Ah, okay.
The drag you get to wear.
Yeah,
That's nothing like it. But other than that, you can have it.
Well, that's what I tell my siblings too. They're still back east, and they can have
I'm
it.
here under duress. but because I have no distractions, really, I've just been working and just working. I wake up, I work, I go to bed, I work. And also I cook a lot. I cook a lot for people. I just cook and work, sleep, cook, eat, work.
So are you a vegetarian? Because you mentioned before you're a restaurant.
I used to be, but then I was a strict vegan for a long time. But then I was on the road with a band, and I could not eat one more potato. Patti LaBelle's, because Patti LaBelle, I met her one time. I was like, because she carries her a trunk full of her spices, because she feeds her band herself.
Okay.
And I told her, I was so inspired by your trunk of spices when I was on the road, but I didn't have that money, so I just couldn't. I said,
couldn't carry it.
Take me to Fat Burger right now. I prayed on the meat. I said, if I could have killed you myself and prayed over you, I would have. But right now, we're going down.
Yeah, I can see where that could be a challenge. Yeah, potatoes after a while could get kind of old.
But I don't eat a lot of meat. But I'm not a vegetarian anymore. Sorry, vegan people. They get mad.
So for those folks out there who might want to follow what you're up to, would you like to share some kind of way they could contact you via social media, or however you feel comfortable, if you want to give out
sure. So far, I do not have a website at the moment, but I am Suesan Stovall, Suesan Stovall on Facebook. Same on Instagram. That's about it.
Okay. Well, that's a lot. Yeah.
I'll be, I'm gonna LinkedIn. Are you on LinkedIn?
I am. But the thing of it is, I need to spend more time on it and just kind of using it. I'm there, and I don't think I'm really active actually. So I need to crack that. Same thing with Instagram and Facebook.
Well, Instagram is easy.
Yeah.
I mean, click, boom. I like it a lot, and a lot of people look at it too, which is interesting. I've sold some stuff on it, but ultimately, just get a website.
Yeah. So is that in the offing, a website?
No.
Maybe.
I have Instagram. I mean, everything I do, I can put on Instagram.
Well, there you go. Why even go there?
To reach me is really easy. Facebook has all my details on it. And there's a Groovy Sue Gallery on my Facebook page as well, but I haven't really done anything with that recently either.
Oh, okay.
So I have something we both got to do.
Yeah, there we go.
Social media together.
Well, I'm encouraging everybody listening and viewing to check it out, Suesan.
Well, thank you.
Suesan, By the way, this has been an enjoyable time speaking with you. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
Excellent. So again, thanks for sharing your perspective, and everybody out there, please don't forget to tune in and subscribe to Eric's Perspective. Thanks a lot.
Bye.